Welcome to the Living in Alignment podcast. My name is Amy Landry. Through a collage of conversations, here we distill mindful living and timeless wisdom within a modern, everyday context. Thank you for being here. Author of the best-selling book, Ayurveda Cooking For Beginners, and creator of numerous courses and trainings on Ayurveda, Laura Plumb promotes sacred, sumptuous living through the Vedic sciences of Ayurveda, Jyotish, mantra, and Devi Sadhana. Laura is lead faculty for the Ayurvedic Integrated Nutrition 200-hour professional training and has studied with some of the great masters of our time, practicing and sharing what she has learned from the heart-centered wisdom schools of the world. Laura's blog, food-alovestory.com, is an inspirational resource for Ayurvedic nourishment and delight. She is widely recognized for understanding and sharing the deeper principles of various Vedic traditions while making them accessible and relevant to modern life. Laura, thank you so much for gracing us with your time and presence here on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Of course, it's wonderful to be with you. I love your podcast.
Thank you. And I appreciate you being here with just coming home from India and the jet lag. And as we usually do here on the podcast, I would really love to begin with some insight into your story or your journey, let's say, and how you specifically came to be so immersed in the wisdom of various of the Vedic traditions, if you would like to share with us a little bit.
Thank you. It's something that I reflect on every now and then. What would I have done if I had known at the age of 8 or 10 or 15 that I could grow up and be a plant whisperer or somebody who pays attention to the movements of the sun and the moon and the planets and the cosmos? What would I have done if I knew that you could be someone who's a nurturer and helps people remember that you are an eternal being? I mean, imagine at 8 years old learning that you can grow up and do that. You can help remind people of the greatness of existence itself and really open up and excite people's hearts and help us all remember our unity and our oneness and the medicine and our breath and our food and our lives. I mean, imagine that. But I had no idea. I knew that I loved those things. I lived close to one of the Great Lakes, and I used to spend all my time there, winter and summer. And, I feel like as a child, I was sort of meditating without knowing that, just spending time contemplating the lake and nature. And I loved that. But I didn't know you could grow up and do that, like be that, right? And so I didn't really come to all of this until much later in my life. I came to it because I went out into the world, and like most people, I went off in search of adventure for sure. But like most people, I had a job and I had a relationship and I had things. And then one day, not one day, but in one period of my life, it just all fell apart. And then at that point, I had already been doing some yoga and I already been meditating since I was 15. And so those were things I really leaned into. And leaning more into these practices, not just because I enjoyed meditating or because I enjoyed yoga, but because I needed to survive, right? And I needed to find what it is that helps us get through, what it is that helps us. Like, what's that rope, right, that you're going to grab hold of when you feel like you're drowning or it's so dark and you can't see your way forward? And so I just really dove so deeply into the Vedic sciences as something that really, really helped me see in the dark, so to speak. And it just all really unfolded from there. I loved yoga. I loved meditation. Through that, I learned about Ayurveda. Through that, I learned about Jyotish. And now I have this gorgeous life where I get to watch the movements of the sun and the moon and the planets, the seasons, and not only live this really sacred life, but to help others live a sacred and sumptuous life. And to remember that you're alive in a world of magnificence that wants you, needs you, brought you alive on purpose to celebrate. And Yes, it's a very special, and
Hmm.
it's a privilege to be able to do this and to live it. And as you said, to go to India and follow our knees and bow to
Mm,
Mother Earth,
mm.
Mother India. And what a privilege, what an honor.
I do
Yeah.
adore the absolutely poetic way that you articulate everything. Not just then, but I just thought of that. I thought every time I watch the things that you share online, your videos on Instagram, even I do love your videos on YouTube as well. And I just find you have this most magnificent, heartwarming, eloquent way that's just full of beauty of expressing your thoughts. I love it so much. And I'm actually curious to know, given we were chatting about India before pressing record, do you have strong memories of your first trip to India, and like how in what ways was that really pivotal for you?
Absolutely. I feel like I can remember every minute of it. And it's pivotal in so many ways. But what happened is that since a young age, I wanted to go to India. And I just would dream of going to India. And I just dreamt of just walking the land, I don't know. I just wanted to go there. And then I had a cousin who went there. And then slowly you're starting to meet people and then it's all these questions of how do you get there? And what do you do? And where do you stay? And then for whatever reasons, I traveled many places. I grew up in the United States, but from the age of 19, I lived in Europe until I was 33. I lived in different countries in Europe. I never myself got to India. And at in 2008, one of my teachers, Dr. David Frawley, just said, "Why don't you come with us? We're going in such and such a time, and why don't you come?" And all of a sudden, it was like, "Do you think I can? Really?" It just took that invitation, and that's why it was such a magical and pivotal trip, because I went with somebody who's really highly esteemed, even in
Mm,
India. He's a Vedic
mm.
teacher of decades. His wife is from India, Shambhavi Chopra, and so I went with the two of them. And it was really beautiful because they invited us up to Rishikesh. We spent a week at an Ayurveda conference called Ayurveda and Consciousness. So it was all about the consciousness that's alive in the natural world and how through Ayurveda we tap into that consciousness. Who is the healer? The healer is the consciousness within you. It was so beautiful because there were so many magnificent teachers and scientists from the West, but also from India. One of my favorite classes was morning meditation. So you had to be up before the sun rose to go and join this small class with this one scientist who actually worked for the ministry. He was the head, I think, of the Ministry of Science or something, but he worked in Delhi for the prime minister. And here he was every morning chanting without looking at any paper or book, chanting shlokas and chanting from the Upanishads and chanting long, long pieces, and then leading us through these gorgeous meditations. And the one thing that I love so much about this man, and I don't want to go on too much about this, but he always had a big fat smile on his face. And every time I saw him, you could see him going up or down a stairwell. You could see him getting food. Wherever it was, he had this giant smile with his big white teeth. And at the end, it wasn't until the end when I learned what he did. I thought he was a doctor of Ayurveda who happened to know the slokas and the sacred, texts that many Ayurvedic doctors will quote. At the end, I said, "Oh, doctor, are you going back to your clinic?" And he said, "Oh, no, madam. I'm going back to Delhi. I work at the pleasure, right, of the prime minister." So
Wow.
here's this man who's working at the highest level of government. And that's what he does. He chants slokas, he meditates every morning, and he smiles his way through life. He's such a beautiful human being. And at that conference, I met organic chemists. I met quantum physics. I met a guy who was a molecular biologist, but now he's a monk. And I said, "Tell me about that. You were once a molecular biologist, now you're a monk." He said, "Well, madam," they call you madam there. "Well, madam,
Mm.
I've always been in search of the nature of reality. And I went looking for it in science." "Oh," I said, "did you find it?" He said, "Of course not. I am now a monk." And I said, "And now you found it?" He said, "Of course, madam." It was so mind blasting, that first experience, because
Mm.
like I said, scientists who were wearing different rings, gems, and gemstones on their fingers. So I worked up the courage to ask this man I was sitting next to, and he's a high level scientist. And I said, "Is there, by any chance, are you wearing those rings for Jyotish?" And he said, of course, my Jyotish teacher insisted I wear them. And he's telling me about his Jyotish, this mind that is so vast, this Vedic mind that can, on the one hand, hold all the facts and figures of sort of Western science and all these beautiful concepts of Jyotish at once, right? That's the vastness of this Vedic mind. And I was so enchanted. I fell in love with the place. And I've been going back every year since.
I just love hearing people's stories about India. I find that enchanting just listening to you. And it just brings me so much joy. I feel like I could say, Laura, let's just spend an hour talking about all your experiences in India and all the stories and the people that you've met. And I just, oh gosh. And I love how it's so evident there when you do engage with people in the community, how these traditions are so inextricably linked into daily life. It's part of daily life, which, you know, has so much to do with what I really wanted to chat with you about. Actually, it's a perfect sort of segue to go into. But, you know, I'm really inspired by you, your work, your presence. I really felt this call to focus our chat today on living life through that Vedic lens. And, you know, you live in the US, as you've said, but you've spent a lot of time in India. You've been in the South specifically very recently. So I thought, you know, can we delve into your experience of amalgamating, let's say, the sciences, all of the sciences of Vedic sciences, but particularly probably, let's say, Ayurveda and Jyotish into modern life, and therefore also guide us into some of the ways that you feel the listener can move in that direction to feel like they're woven through daily life. So these systems, you know, alongside yoga, Vastu, for example, are so inextricably linked together and within Indian life, as I've already said. So, but that Western mind tends to compartmentalize them. So with that context, what are some distinct ways that we can bring the true richness of these traditions into our daily life? There's so many, I'm sure, but, you know, I'd love to know what comes to mind for you.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful question. I think it's an important question. A beautiful thing I remember hearing from Dr. David Frawley, he's talking about how our mind is, he said this word atomic, and what he's talking about is that we have this tendency to see pieces of things, and then the brain puts it together into a whole. And so there is a point in our life where we're going to have to study one thing at a time. But then, of course, if we're lucky, there's going to be a point where it all comes together and you understand and you live the integration. But if we think about where does yoga come from, Vastu, Ayurveda, Jyotish, it all comes from one source. It comes from the Vedas. And we could say Ayurveda is an Upaveda, and Jyotish is a Vedanga. Okay, but they're still coming from the source, which is the Vedas. And the Vedas are giving us this incredible wisdom about who we are. What is our place in this world? What is this world anyway? And how do we live in it, not only harmoniously, which we really need if we are going to sustain life here, but also more than even harmoniously, we want to see if we can live beautifully, elegantly, masterfully, right? We want to be able to live a full life. And we want to be able to live a full life in a way that gives us great satisfaction. To me, I think we are most satisfied when we feel a part of an interconnected weave, that we belong to this world, and that our actions aren't selfish, but that the things that we do that fulfill our purpose, that fulfill our delight, also helps to uplift others, right? And so, you know, the Vedas are really the science of that. And then I often think about the Ganges River. My first many trips to India were always in Rishikesh on the Ganges River. And the Ganges is this merging of these three rivers, right? These three rivers come together, and then it's this great flow of Ganga. But where do those three rivers come from, right? So there's the top of the Himalayas. There's this one source. There's this peak that is covered in snow, white, reflecting the light of the sun. So it's like this light that melts and becomes rivers, and then the rivers become one. And I think we're like that. There's the source, then there's the strands that we're going to explore, and then one day we're going to merge it all together, and we're going to be like the mighty Ganga. And the Swamiji, we call him, where we would stay in Rishikesh, he would say, Ganga gives and Ganga forgives. She's like this everlasting flow that is, in a way, always giving. Her flow nurtures life. And so hopefully, thanks to our study of these Vedic sciences, we become like that too, hopefully. A flow that nurtures life, right? So I think it's whether it's doing yoga on a mat every morning and recognizing that you're stronger than you knew, recognizing that breathing deep can help you hold in a pose, that can help you hold through tension, right? That can help you be present to the challenge, right? That's something you can easily take into your life. We can often, all of us, think about different experiences where that might help us. And then whether it's Ayurveda, learning that warm water is better than cold water, that if you need to hydrate, right, sip warm water or sip even hot water. Learning about living with the seasons. These are such easy, simple things. But all of it is about one thing, and that's about paying attention. Bring an attentive mind to anything that you're doing and notice. And then you can take skill and action from there. But you can't take any skill and action if you're not paying attention, right? You don't have any choice if you're not paying attention to the choices, if you're not paying attention to the stimulus and how it affects you and how you might want it to affect you more or less, right? Choice comes from first paying attention to what's going on in your life and in your world, and even in your mind and in your body. So at the end of the day, I think all of it, Jyotish, Ayurveda, yoga, it's all inviting us to pay more attention, like a sharper attention, but also fuller attention to everything, and to not be afraid. I think a lot of times we're afraid of paying attention. It might hurt. It might trigger. It might be difficult. Yeah. So these practices help us to stay present to anything that might arise. What a gift. What a gift is that?
And it's very indigenous in some way. You think about the way that indigenous communities, that we're very connected to the seasons, the elements, nature, how they lived, you know. So with that awareness and unity with everything around them. So it's almost like, you know, shifting our mind into that real fundamental nature in some sense. And whilst in some way the daily steps and the rhythm and the routine and the dinacharya and the asana practice and the pranayama, whilst they can help because they're kind of giving us steps, tangible steps, there's I guess there's another level that we can step into that's this just continual embodiment. And as you say, through awareness, through presence, which is of course an ongoing practice, where we don't have to be so rigid and dogmatic anymore about, well, I need to do these exact steps to be doing Ayurveda or to be doing yoga or what have you, and let it be an inherent part of daily life.
1,000% agree with you. I actually just wrote that word indigenous recently when I was talking about Ayurveda. It's an indigenous medicine. I think one thing is that I think it's important when we're learning, when we're starting out, to have a practice that we follow, because we don't want to be dilettantes. We want to be respectful and we want to be consistent. And that consistency is so important for cultivating the fruits of our practice. But then, sure, then we can dance with it. Then it becomes a play. We can be doing our meditation as we're taking the dog for a walk in the morning, right? But I think that's what you said about indigenous. I used to teach yoga, and oftentimes I would invite people to feel their indigenous body, to feel themselves indigenous, alive in their own body, to feel that your breath is indigenous. You are indigenous. You belong to this world. But when we use that term indigenous, I think we're also reminding ourselves respect, right? Ayurveda, yoga, these are not commodities. I get so many people when I go to India asking, where can I go for PK? I don't even answer the question. I don't mean to be rude. I want to help people who really need the help. But this isn't for sale. This isn't a commodity. You don't just grab and go. And I won't participate in helping people do that. I hope I'm not somebody who does that. I always seek, and still maybe there's more that we can do to be really respectful and to give more than we take. And I think that that's an important part of what you're saying. I think when I hear that term indigenous, let's be respectful.
There's, respectful, and there's a reverence, I think.
Reverence. Definitely.
Mm.
Definitely. And how beautiful. Step into reverence and live like that.
I think it's very energizing
Yeah.
to be in a reverent state. Mm.
Yes.
And it slows us down. Comes back to that awareness as well.
It goes back to appreciation. It goes back to gratitude. We all know, everybody's got a gratitude journal, right? We know what that does. It helps us feel better. And reverence is like gratitude exalted. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
see it
Beautiful.
when you're in India, the temples, and how people just throw themselves down in front of the deity or whoever they feel, devotional toward or strengthened by. You really do see that. I mean, look, India's certainly a place of polarities, that's for sure, but you really see that every day, just woven through daily life, which is beautiful and something that we could definitely witness and learn from, for sure. And all of these systems on some level, and this ties in with something that you had touched on, but particularly Ayurveda and Jyotish both certainly show us, let's say, our place in the world, or within the rhythms of life. And you actually mentioned in one of your YouTube videos that Ayurveda and Jyotish. Let's just clarify here. For anyone listening, Jyotish is Vedic astrology, which is a little different to Western astrology. There is a previous episode on Vedic astrology. But Ayurveda and Jyotish, they overlap. And you mentioned that they overlap specifically in the realm of medical astrology. So I assume that this relates to like our proclivities and our inherent health tendencies. Could you expand upon this? I'm just curious to understand more.
Well, in a way, they're all sister sciences. I like to say that yoga helps us understand the nature of reality, as my friend the scientist would said that he went looking for. So if yoga helps us understand the nature of reality, I think Ayurveda helps us understand the reality of nature. And Jyotish is a kind of expanded Ayurveda. If Ayurveda helps us remember that not only is nature ever surrounding you with its loving wisdom, you too are nature. Right? You are every bit as beautiful, bountiful, mighty, majestic, sacred, and sumptuous. And Jyotish is reminding you that, and you're the cosmos. You are the coming alive of a matrix of light, of the planets and stars moving constantly through time and space. And yet in that split second, they were in one matrix, this one pattern of light, and you're the coming alive of that. Whoa. I mean, stop and think, breathe that in for a minute. You are this matrix of light, and you are here to know that. But as Sri Aurobindo said, you're here not just to know that, you're here to evolve that. You're here to creatively and consciously participate in the creative evolution itself. The creative evolution, of consciousness itself. So to me, that's the first way that Jyotish and Ayurveda overlap. Jyotish helps you understand the uniqueness of you. Ayurveda helps you understand the uniqueness of you. Yoga helps us understand the oneness of us all. But Ayurveda says, and in this human existence, in this human body, you're wholly unique. You're wholly individual. And Jyotish takes that even further. So Jyotish supports Ayurveda in that, first and foremost. And Jyotish can also help us understand not only the uniqueness of our physical body, but also the uniqueness of our mental and emotional body. And I think that in itself is quite a gift in a world where it's just so much easier to just lump people together and treat them all as one. To send kids to school where there's 30 kids in a class and just give them cookie cutter education. And then everybody's got to kind of fit, and we all are going to wear the same sweater this season and the same color the next season. And, like we're all treated as just like this one blob moving along together, right? When in fact, we're all part of the spectrum of light, right? Reflecting light in these gorgeous, unique ways. So that's one thing. The second thing is exactly what you said, where Jyotish has a medical piece to it. Medical astrology, it's referred to. And that's pretty complex, but just at the most basic level, we can look at somebody's rising sign, and that'll help us understand their prakriti, their mind, body, constitution. We can look at their moon and see if there's afflictions to the mind. We can see the 6th or the 8th houses to see what tendencies are towards digestive issues, perhaps, or different things I don't want to say. I don't want to scare people.
Mm.
But, because Jyotish isn't about finding fault or finding flaws, but it's really about affirming the light of you.
Mm.
There's other things too. There's what we refer to as Vargas. There's different divisional charts that can help us understand better a person's evolution and karmas. It's the science of karma. Not to say that it's the science of all the things you did bad in past lives and that you're now here, to pay for. No, it's that karmas are just simply ways to help you evolve, to help you grow. What's the thing that's going to break open your mind and your heart so that you can be greater? You can be your true greatness. That's how I see karmas. So yeah, the chart will help to shed light on that.
Mm.
And all of that is a kind of medicine, really, isn't it?
It's
So that's the
fascinating.
Ayurveda. Yeah.
And I feel like it's so grounding in some sense. It anchors
So
us
good.
into something, that can just aid us in our direction in life and clarity. And yeah, it sounds, reassurance, give us some reassurance, which on some level, all of that is imperative at the moment in the world that we live in. And so continuing to delve into, I suppose on some level, both Ayurveda and Jyotish, I'd love to talk about the concept of remedies. Many would interpret that word if it's related to some kind of medicine or cure, for example. And on some level,
Yeah.
of course, that's true. But could you share with us some insight through your lens into remedies and why what they might look like through the Vedic lens, through the Vedic context?
So what I'd first like to say is I really appreciate your depth of knowledge and your depth of reverence. So yeah, I want to make sure that I do share that because I really love how you bring so much clarity
Thank you.
to the practices. So thank you for that. And so the word for remedy in Jyotish is upaya. And upaya is a beautiful word that doesn't really mean remedy, it means efforts. So what are the efforts that we're going to make that would help us evolve, right? Help us burn off our illusions, right? Our attachment to separation. And those upayas are really, really beautiful. And I always will say to people, I'll preface it by saying, this is a spiritual science, right? Jyotish is a sister science to yoga. Yoga is the prime Veda of the Vedas, and that means it is the prime Veda is the path of self-realization, right? So all of it is there to support that path, that we would be self-realized in this life. And so therefore, these upayas are going to be spiritual practices. They're going to be yogas. They're going to be efforts to help someone. It might mean doing silly things like feeding crows on Saturdays, but still you're doing something for something other than yourself. It could be disciplines as well. It could be that you can only eat black gram. I'm giving this the Saturn upayas because they tend to be the most unusual in a way for a Westerner. You can only eat black gram on Saturdays, but on certain days of the week, you're going to only eat certain things. Or you might fast. You might skip dinner every Monday night. Or you might, get up every Thursday morning extra early and do an extra amount of mantras, practices. So there's disciplines, but mostly it's about doing something that's beyond the limited self, beyond the ego, to take you out of that. And the whole idea there, and mantras are the number one upayas to do mantras. Mantras for the planets, mantras for an afflicted planet, or mantra for a strong planet, in order to ask that more of its strength come into your life and help you out. And really mantras, in a way, help. I always think of mantras as being like the waves that help to wash the shore clean. So if the shore has lines and rivers and rivulets and right, and then all of a sudden a wave comes and it just washes it clean. And our mind is like that, right? We get these synaptic patterns and they can grow strong, and we get these tight cords in our brain, and now we're really fixed to that thought. We can't get rid of that thought, or we keep doing these certain behaviors over and over. Mantra is a way of just like, let's just cleanse that. Let's just come back to zero and rebuild the brain. Let's rebuild the mind, and let's build it like an open field, right? with nothing blocking our vision, so that anything is possible. That's to me what mantras do. Mantras help to clear the mind so that we return to our own pure awareness from which we can create anew. That's really how we are working with our karmas, untying the knots so we can be free. And we do that through mantra mostly. So those are mostly the upayas. Really lovely, really.
You have such beautiful metaphor for everything. Everything. It's just it's so amazing. And I think for the listener out there, again, if anyone's listening to this who's very new to Jyotish, some of the examples you gave relative to days of the week are due, correct me if I'm wrong, but due to the planet that rules that day of the week. That's why certain days are selected for certain remedies or practices.
And everybody did that. Everybody everywhere named this days of the week for the planets. Like in Rome, they did that. In Greenwich, UK, they did that, right? It isn't just Sanskrit. It isn't just ancient. Everybody named the days of the weeks for these 7 planets, reminding us that we live in that weave of light, that these planets are our neighbors, it's Earth's neighbors, right? And that they have an impact, that there's a gravitational pull, there's an electromagnetic energy. And when they move and they shift, all anybody has to do is look at October. And Jyotishis were warning that October was going to be fiery and brutal. And that's because of all this alignment of fiery planets in malefic ways, and retrograde Saturn and Jupiter, and
eclipses.
Eclipses, thank you, and eclipses. And so, we can see it at play. Sunday, sun. Monday, moon. Tuesday is Mars Day. In European languages, it's mardi or martedi, right? So you see Mars there. Tuesday, I think that's named for Thor, right? But also a fiery planet from the Norse mythology. And then Wednesday is Mercury. Thursday of Jupiter, by Jove, they used to call him. And that must be Thor. So I don't know who Tuesday's named for in the Norse mythology. But anyway, we have this mix of different languages and cultures in our English language. Friday, of course, is Venus. Saturday is Saturn. So you could even, I do this a lot where I'll dress for the planet's day. If it's Wednesday, it's green for Mercury.
Well, there's colors and gemstones, and obviously it's a very multifaceted approach, but it's such a simple and practical way that we can just start to align ourselves with that awareness of the planets each day, and then therefore tap into that reverence, because obviously the Western mind is really looking for something tangible and practical to develop that connection.
Right. And it can sound superficial that on Wednesday I'm going to wear green, but the truth is these color is also a therapy, and these colors are rays of light. There's a beautiful artist, really important artist in Kerala, who did a beautiful TED Talk on the power of color, and she invites you to notice color every single day and pay attention. Spend 5 or 10 minutes every morning just looking at one color. And she says, the more you look at it, the more you're going to see that there's more than one color in that color. In blue, there might be some yellows, some greens, some reds. But more importantly, what she's saying is that when you pay attention to color, color is one of the rays in the spectrum of light. You are paying attention to light. You are developing a relationship with light. And on the day, let's again give Wednesday as the example, on the day of Mercury, Mercury is the planet that represents intellect, discernment, reasoning, analysis, problem solving, study, learning, speaking, presenting, communicating, connecting, even travel, even friends. Mercury's playful. He's the prince, right? So he loves to learn, but he also likes to knock off early and go play with his friends. So there's a lightness to Mercury. And just to wake up in the morning and remember it's Wednesday and put on something green is a way of helping yourself remember that this is the day to do Mercury things. This would maybe be a good day to do your communications or your study or problem solve, right? Or some kind of creative content making, let's say, right? This might also be a good day to eat green foods, to get into nature and experience green nature. So it's a trigger that's helping us to live accordingly. And why not? Why not wrap yourself in green? Why not wrap yourself in the planet Mercury that day? Why not treat yourself like the queen or the king or the prince? Why not live sumptuously? And these are little ways that you can do it without spending any money.
It sounds probably superficial, but something that came to my mind too is I thought, well, it's also going to make the decision making a little bit easier each day, because if I have some direction on a color,
Right.
then maybe I'll know what don't have to think about it so much anymore.
Yeah.
But and I think for those who are quite aware of Ayurveda and integrating Ayurveda into their life, we put emphasis on some level on the influence of the doshas at different periods of the day. That I think is becoming a lot more commonplace, that awareness. Lunch is the biggest meal because of pitta, etc. So the governing qualities of the doshas at different times of the day. So really just what you've just spoken about in terms of the planets, the colors, the daily focus, it's just another layer of the same kind of thing. So it might seem like quite a new approach because it's coming from that a bit more of a Jyotish lens, but it's really the same thing. It's like looking at how we can weave these traditions into daily life in a very fun, lovely way.
In a fun and lovely way. And why shouldn't it be accessible and lovely? It's like you said earlier, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be so strict. It can be beautiful. Nature is beautiful. She wants you to experience beauty. In the tantric world, the tantric viewpoint, there's this idea that your five senses are goddesses, they're devis. And they're here to interact and play and dance with the Shiva energy, the pure awareness, the consciousness that is alive in everything in this world. Your senses are here to be alive to the light of this world. And when we live that way, again, paying attention, how do I use my five senses? Not lazy, not stuffing food in our mouth or stuffing deranging noises in our brain, right? But really, wow, what if my five senses are goddesses, devis, the divine feminine? How do I want to feed them? How do I want to nourish them? So I think it's about paying attention, but it's also about allowing yourself to be reverent and treat yourself as a reverent part of this reverent world, right? You are interconnected. You are an important, integral part of nature itself. And so treat yourself that way, and you'll see the whole world will sort of rise to meet that. It's amazing how there's a beautiful concept now talking about the origins of the universe. And it's so beautiful because the Big Bang, of course, is still just a theory. And there's this new theory emerging that's kind of based on games, video games. And they're calling it games theory. And it's this idea that if you play video games, the video game itself cannot have every possibility, every bit of the detail of that possibility of what you might do next, completely already built. What it does is it responds to your next step, and it builds the next three possibilities of where you might go. So you might go straight, you might go right, you might go left, you might be digging, you might go down. So it's going to give more dirt, but not the whole world of dirt, just enough that you can make your next decision. And what if the world is like that? What if the world is just completely responding to your next 2 or 3 steps, right? So that idea that you've got to take the step, even if you don't see the entire staircase, it's like there is no staircase. You have to take the step so the staircase will be built for you to walk upon. And I think that's a beautiful way to live. So take the steps with reverence. Treat your five senses like they're devis, right? Treat your body like it's a temple. Wake up in the morning and wear green if it's Wednesday, or wear pink because it's your favorite color, but live like majestically and remember that you are that. You're the coming alive of a matrix of light. You're born on purpose to know that you are indigenous, you belong to this world. You are loved and you are supported. Why not live like that? And then you set an example for how everybody else can live. And then what a beautiful world this would be.
That so perfectly leads me into where I wanted to go next, actually. Just spot on. Yes, so given the state of the world at the moment, a lot of heartache, a lot of pain, and there always is on some level, but it's been very amplified of late. What would you suggest are maybe one or two key ways you feel that we can better take care of our nervous systems, our mental, or maybe even our physical health, because it's obviously so interrelated during these very turbulent times in the world, specifically that obviously relates to, the Vedic sciences or the Vedic context.
Yeah. Well, you're right. It's hard. It's a hard time to be alive. It's hard to see so much suffering in the world. And what we're seeing now is just such brutal, devastating, awful, awful. I think. Can I give a story? Do we have enough time for me to tell just a little
We
story?
have as much time as you like. Yes.
Go on. Last week I was in India, and it really was a week ago. And I was in a car. I was being taken somewhere to a beautiful Ayurvedic center to meet an Ayurvedic doctor friend of mine. And we were crossing this bridge, and a big school bus in front of us stopped very suddenly, and a motorcycle behind them that I hadn't even noticed until this happened. I think they hit very gently the back of that bus, but it caused them to tip over. And it wasn't until they tipped that I actually noticed it, but it was a grandfather, a grandmother, and a child. And all of a sudden you see them on the ground, and we all jump out and we all run over to see if they're okay and to help them out. And it's not funny, but we're all okay. They just tipped, right? They just lost their balance. And fortunately, it wasn't too heavy. And there's grandma. So she's holding the child, and then the child was holding onto grandpa. And so grandma's on the ground holding the baby, and the baby fell into grandma, and grandma was cushioned. So baby was completely okay. Grandma looked completely stunned. I couldn't see the baby. The child was maybe 3. And anyway, get them righted. First of all, one of the most beautiful things to see was grandpa immediately jumps up. Grandma's now standing holding the baby, and the baby's, this child, this infant, is stunned. And the grandpa doesn't do what I would have done, like, oh my God, are you okay? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. The grandpa starts to play with the child, baby, 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 and making this child, just trying to bring joy back, trying to bring delight back, trying to bring the child back. It was so beautiful how this grandpa was so sweet with this baby, and grandma just holding. Like, they both did the right things. Anyway, they get over to the side. They get back on the little motorcycle. Grandpa's in the front. Grandma's in the back. And they're just sitting there for a minute. They're just kind of taking their breath. But then there's this child, and she's just sitting there facing forward. And as we start to move and go drive away, I'm just looking back at her, just watching her. And all of a sudden, she sort of blinks, and then she just bursts into tears, And at that moment, I thought, that's that moment that we all had in our life, where we suddenly realized that even in our grandmother's arms holding grandpa, life may not always be safe. Like, life isn't always a game. It isn't always play. It isn't always this loving embrace. Hard things can happen in life. Scary things can happen in life. Suffering can happen in this world. It's like that moment, just, you could see her go right across her face. Oh my God, she just realized that. And I just was heartbroken. So physically she was fine, but you just saw, like, oh God, that's that moment. And we all have had that moment. And the next thought I was, wow, that's what this October was for all of us. Once again, even though we're adults, we just saw, whoa, the world can be so much more brutal and violent than I ever even thought it could be. And I think so many of us in October just had that same heartbreak. Like, oh, what? What am I seeing? And it just broke, it breaks your heart. It really breaks something. And so I think, as you ask this question, what can we do? How can we protect the nervous system? I think the first thing is to let yourself feel it. We don't pretend it isn't happening. We don't get overly dramatic either. It's not overly drama, and it's also not ignoring it. This is happening, and this is something that we have to feel. We don't want to become robots or pieces of wood. We want to be alive, and we want to keep our heart alive. So that might mean that we have to schedule into our calendar moments where we can be left completely alone, and if we feel like crying, we just cry. And if we have to flop ourselves on the bed and just hold ourselves in the fetal position, we just got to do that. A lot of times when I was in India and I would sort of hear some news, I would just go for a walk. I just felt like I was just going to have that primal scream. Like, I cannot believe I felt like this mother, like, no, like, no, how can you do this to the children? Right. And I just had to go for a walk and just feel that and let that feeling out. And I think that if we don't, we are going to really mess up our nervous system. But we can't take it out on others, right? So go for a walk, flop on the bed, pound your fists on a pillow, let yourself cry, let yourself feel these feelings. I think that's how you honor the people who have lost lives and who are waiting to hear from their loved ones if they're still alive, and those who are hurt. And you honor them, I think, second to that by saying prayers. And we often dismiss that when people just send thoughts and prayers to another 20 victims of gun violence. But if we are all interconnected and we truly believe that, then prayer does matter and it does make a difference. And I like to imagine that there are angels that descend, like there are beings of light that descend and come to collect the children. How are we going to leave the children in these situations? We got to imagine. I have to imagine they're being picked up by these angels of light, and they're being held, and they're being carried home, and that there is a place of light that they're going to. I have to see what happens next, and I have to see that it's good. That helps my nervous system a lot, sort of to finish the narrative. And I get to finish the narrative and know that they are going to the light. And that they're in that light. I'm not saying what's happening is okay, but they're in the light. They're okay. They are okay. And there are Atmas who are light, and that cannot be broken. And then, of course, there's the things we do. We have to get lots of rest. We have to take Epsom salt baths. We have to feed ourselves light, warm, digestible foods with good amount of ghee or coconut oil. We have to do some deep breathing. We have to walk with our bare feet on the soil. We have to hug our loved ones. We have to cuddle with our pets. Right? We have to stop and smell the roses and actually take the roses and put them in our hands and touch our face with rose petals. We have to remember what is safe and good. And it's not wrong for you to let yourself feel safe and okay at a time when others aren't. Because what I truly believe is that the world needs people with regulated nervous systems who really hold to the peace of the heart and the light within. We will not create a more peaceful world if people abandon that. We have to remember who we are. We are here to bring light to the world, and we have to keep doing it no matter what the world shows us. We have to keep believing that light exists, and we are here to keep bringing it to the world. I feel very strongly about that. In a time like this, your light is needed more than ever. So do what you need to do, but don't lose it. Don't throw it away. Don't fall into despair. We can't afford that. We can't afford, because then the shadow, the darkness wins. That's what they want. We can't let them win, right? Light has to win. Peace must prevail. I was just saying this the other day. Somebody said, well, it's not very realistic at this point to expect peace. And I said, peace is always realistic. We have to believe that, because peace is who we are. Pure awareness, consciousness is the energy of peace. And that's at the heart of who we are. So the closer we can live to that peace of the heart, doing whatever you need to do to stay in your center, that's how you serve those who have lost, those who are grieving, those who are broken. You do it by staying in the center of your being and being a person of peace. And it does, there's studies that show that all we have to do is reach critical mass in order for there to be a shift. And the critical mass is not 51%. Critical mass is 18 to 20%. There are also studies that show that when a large group of people meditate in a town, then crime goes down in that town for that period of time that the people are meditating, and for days, and weeks afterwards. Wow. So if we all continue to meditate and we all continue to do our practices of peace, it does resonate out into the world. We cannot get cynical about this, right? We have to stay the course. We have to remember who we are. This is part of our dharma. Maybe the greatest dharma that anyone here, anyone amongst us has, is to be the grounding of peace in our world, so that it can go out, ripple out, ripple out, ripple out. And maybe by some way that we don't know, we can't even imagine. It's not up to us to have all the answers, but to ripple out peace so that one day peace comes to the Middle East. Sure, it may not seem realistic today, but it is realistic and it is a possibility, and we've got to believe in it.
You've shared such wisdom, and everything you've said I feel very, very aligned with, 100%. And I know personally, I've really, when you were mentioning earlier about not turning it away, you know, I've really I've looked into this, and I've been letting myself be exposed to a lot of footage, very graphic. And that's part of me almost feeling like I can't turn my eye away from this because I feel like I'm denying what's happening. And I feel like a sense of the connection of humanity. I guess I felt a strong sense of I need to take on some responsibility for being very aware of the brutality in the world right now. And it has definitely, you know, it's been challenging because it's affected my sleep, my dreams. I've shed lots of tears. I've literally cried out for Devi, like just thinking, what else can I do? Like, you know, for the Divine Mother to come, and makes me emotional just talking about it now. And I think too, as well as women, but if you have children yourself, you feel that connection to that suffering so much more easily. Thinking of the children particularly, it's devastating. And at the same time, I kind of got to a point where I went, I now need to move away from this, because I need to come back to that strength and come back to that light and sort of transmit that pain, transmit that suffering into something useful and productive. And we can see so much division happening around the world right now that's not serving anybody. It's not serving anybody anywhere. It's just only creating more pain.
Succeeded in breaking us down even further into even greater fragmentation, division, anger, hate. I wrote my niece, who's at one of the colleges where there's been some really painful protests that have locked students in libraries. Really difficult. Anyway, she's at that university, and I said, "Are you okay? And what are you experiencing?" And she said, "There's just so much pain right now. Everybody's in so much pain." And I thought, what a wise 19-year-old, that she's not getting angered by it, but she's just recognizing there's so much pain. And I think that is really a call. It's a call for unity when sadly the opposite seems to be happening. But this is this reminder that, you know, there's nobody coming to save us. There's no parent in the room here. That's why we have to take responsibility. And if you've been doing yoga for a year or more, then you know what to do. And certainly if you're practicing Ayurveda, or you've learned about Ayurveda, then you also know what to do. And it's not to say, I think, you know, you asked the question brilliantly, and you're so brave in doing the work that you've been doing. We want to turn towards it. We need to know, but we don't need to get broken ourselves. And we have the tools, and it's up to us to walk in the light. I mean, we're not the political leaders. We're not the government leaders. What are we going to do? But we can continue to be aware of what's happening, continue to feel the feelings and not turn away from it, and to continue to really hold the light and be a torchbearer for a world that really, really needs that right now.
And also to think about all the privilege we have.
Yeah.
To even have a voice, to even voice your opinion, you know, particularly in the Western world, to even have the privilege to be able to voice your opinion on something and not be slaughtered for it or whatever. We you know, think about my grandparents and my great-grandparents, and they'd just be looking on thinking, look at the world, like how magnificent, look at this life you have, what a gift, you know. Don't let yourself be taken into darkness, and appreciate waking up each day and being able to look outside, and there's fresh air and there's color and there's space and there's peace, and it's there's food on the table, and I know where I'm going to sleep tonight, and there's so much to be tremendously grateful for.
Yeah. And wouldn't, you sort of imagine that somebody maybe just lost their life. Wouldn't they want that? Wouldn't they want to say to you, like, the one thing I want for you, that because you're still alive, is appreciate every moment. Appreciate what you've got. I think that's how we serve
For
those who are
sure.
suffering, those who,
Hold your children tighter. Be more patient with them. Savor those
yeah,
moments. Yeah.
savor the, live reverentially, because that's how you live with gratitude, with respect. Yeah. And with awareness.
I'd like to let's lighten the direction a little, and I'd love to briefly touch on your book that you released a few years ago. You have a couple of new ones in the works at the moment that will be coming out in the future, but your book, Ayurvedic Cooking for Beginners, serves as such a nourishing tool for our community, for our nervous systems. And I'd love to know, what was your vision behind this book, and how it serves the reader, particularly for those out there that don't own your book yet?
Well, that's great. And I just yesterday, had an experience where I wrote to this woman and I said, that's why I write my blog and I wrote my book. And what happened is, well, while we were in India, we had a cooking class at the Ayurvedic Center where we stayed. And they made about 5 dishes, and then they gave us a handout. And the handout had recipes. But it's a recipes that were written by a chef. So it says, and it also, by the way, in the United States, we measure things by quantity and not by weight. So we would say a tablespoon of this or a cup of that, and they say grams. They measure things by weight, as you might, I think, in Australia, right? And England does. And so so we have these recipes that were given to us that nobody knows how to read, because they don't know how to weigh things, and they don't know half the time what they're even talking about. There was one thing where it said fried gram, didn't say how much, just fried gram, GRAM. So people are writing me like, what's fried gram? and these are, so everybody's back in the States now, but now they've got this handout and they want to try to make these recipes. So then somebody else wrote, well, Laura, have you tried the Avial, AVIAL? It's a Kerala dish. And I said, no, because I'm not that crazy about Avial. And they said, well, I can't understand what these vegetables are. They want us to use snake gourd. Anyway, they listed all these different vegetables, none of which, ash gourd, bitter gourd, snake gourd, different things. And I wrote her back and I said, that's why I started my blog. And that's why I wrote my book. Because it used to be that when you were a student of Ayurveda, and I know I'm going back and dating myself, but it used to be that when you were a student of Ayurveda, you'd be handed these lists of foods that are grown in India, that are very common in India, that are very good for you, very healing, but we do not have where I live in Southern California. So you get a list, you get recipes, and you're like, I don't know what this is, let alone where to find it, and let alone what to do with it once I bring it home. So I just would start to look at things, and I would do my research, and I'd say, okay, well, bitter gourd is bitter. And so they obviously want us to have a vegetable that's bitter, and it's probably very detoxifying. So what do we have here that would relate? Well, nothing relates quite to bitter gourd, but, and you start to think about, how can we make it more accessible and more palatable, so that we are creating recipes that still have the Ayurvedic principles, that still have the Ayurvedic purpose. So are you detoxifying, purifying, nourishing, balancing? What are you balancing? The season, the dosha. What time of day is it? Are you making breakfast, lunch, or dinner? If it's lunch, it should be the main meal. Heavier foods can go at lunch. Dinner should be lighter. So it's just bringing in all of these principles in a way that would be, as I said, accessible. But accessible to me meant accessible ingredients and palatable. It had to be delicious. If it's not tasty, people aren't going to eat it. So, I made my own Chyavanprash, and I just called it Rejuve Jam. And I made it with plums and dates and blueberries and all the purple fruits, because people were telling me that Chyavanprash just tasted like it had too much sugar in it. And Chyavanprash does have a lot of sugar in it. And people in the West don't necessarily want that. So it's not always making it sweeter or saltier to make it more tasty to us. It's not that. It's just we've grown up with certain kinds of foods that are familiar for us, right? And so that's really what the principle was. And it was about fewer ingredients, make it something that you can make in 30 minutes with a few exceptions. For special occasions, you might put 45 or 50 minutes into it. But I wanted it to be something that it could be just very easy for busy, busy people to do. It's not that fancy of a book. The recipes aren't that fancy. I often think, in a way, it's plain and simple. The first criticism of the book on Amazon was boring. She didn't say boring, but something like the recipes, they're very basic. These recipes are for beginners, is what she wrote. And I thought the title is Beginner's Guide to Ayurveda Cooking. So, that's what I was looking for, was that it would be easy and accessible for beginners. So.
Well, you're able to reach a wider audience and therefore serve a wider audience, which is so important. And it's so helpful what you've done, because you've taken a lot of the guesswork out for people, not just because they don't know the vegetable or they can't source it, but also because, the average person may only know a little about Ayurveda, doesn't understand, that some foods are heating or cooling or have like a post-digestive effect and so forth. And so you're obviously doing all that work for them and then bringing it all together to make it so much more accessible. And, and at the end of the day, I think with Ayurvedic food, if this person said, oh, it's basic or beginners, some of the most nourishing food in Ayurveda is really simple.
That's so true. And so I don't think that this commenter, I think she's more of a foodie person, not an
Mm,
Ayurvedic person.
mm.
And so she didn't understand that some of the beauty of Ayurvedic food is that it can be very simple, and yet in that simplicity, so nourishing, so whole body delicious, right? And I think also what you just said about foods can have the VPAC, the post-digestive effect, the heating or cooling. It's also about combining the six tastes. So the recipes all combine every six taste. Every one of the six tastes is there in each recipe. And then the food combinations, right? So you don't have to go and think about, gosh, I've got dairy, I've got fruit. Can I combine them? I can't remember. Let me find the list. If you just follow the recipes, it's going to be the right food combining as well. So
Super important with the amount of digestive complaints that many people have these days, and they just don't know what to do.
73% of Americans have complained to their health practitioner of digestive disorders. And I often think I've never complained to a health practitioner of digestive disorders. So what does it take for you to reach that level where you're going to the doctor? I mean, we've all gone to a place like India or Mexico, or I don't know what the equivalent is for you guys, but you go to a place where foods are different, you pick up a bug, and then you've got digestive disorders for a week, a month, a couple of years, right? And so it's rampant, and people don't know what to eat. They don't know how to combine their meals. They don't know what to cook. And so I'm fully of the belief that Ayurveda could save the world. And I feel dedicated to helping helping as many people as possible benefit from the beauty and the genius of Ayurveda.
Well, thank you for your tireless work in the field. I would love to
Joyful work.
I would love to actually close our chat today. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, first of all, do you have one or two books that you, aside from yours, that you would recommend, particularly as it might pertain to our conversation today, but whatever comes to mind? What would be some recommended reading for the listener?
Well, you know what? I'm reading a book right now that I can't recommend highly enough, and it's not Ayurvedic. It's called The Covenant of Water. And the reason I love it so much is that it's all set in Kerala on the backwaters. And I just think he writes so poetically about that part of the world. And there's an elephant, and there's nature, and there's food and recipes. And I feel like it is Ayurveda that way. Kerala is the home of Ayurveda. And he writes so beautifully about a century, a family across the century from 1900 to current times. And so I think that's an important book to read. And then if I found myself left alone on a deserted island, I always have thought I would want to have the Upanishads with me, the complete works of the Upanishads. So for anybody who has not yet read the Upanishads, find a good translation. And to me, that's the poetry of the Vedas. And that's the reminder that you live in a world that is just pure genius, and that you're not separate from that. You are that.
May I ask you, the first book that you mentioned, did you pick that up while you're in India?
My mother was reading it. It's a 500-page book. I thought, I'm not taking a 500-page book to India. So I downloaded it on Audible and listened to it.
Oh, lovely.
And it's the author who reads it, who narrates it. So it's especially beautiful.
That's the
Yeah.
best. Yes. Okay. I thought I'd ask because I love buying books in India. It's so cheap and
Yeah.
you can get some gems over there.
Yeah. They didn't seem to know about it over there. I said, you guys are going to start to get a lot of tourists because this book is it's on the bestseller lists in America. So
Ah,
yeah.
right. Okay. I'm definitely going to check that out. And we'll pop these in the show notes as well. So people can easily find it. Okay, next question. What is your favorite meal?
Oh, easy. That's so easy. I am so predictable. I love a bowl of dal. I love the humble mung bean. I'm a big fan
Mm,
of that simple pod, that little guy who really packs a lot of protein and a lot of fiber, 35 grams of protein in 1 cup of mung beans. And there's so many magical ways of making it. Again, in India, they have dal tarka, dal mahani, all kinds of different dals.
mm-hmm.
And I just love dal. And I don't need it with rice. I like it with maybe some steamed vegetables. It all depends on the season. But yeah, if somebody was going to make me a meal, I could ask for anything, it'd probably be a good Indian dal.
Yum. It's so nourishing. So good. And okay, so next question. What is your favorite season of the year and why?
Well, I feel like it's always the season that you're just embarking on. Um, Early autumn is so gorgeous with the golden hues and colors, and it's always so nice to have that just cooling breeze that comes in just when you needed it. You're just tired of being hot all the time, and all of a sudden in comes autumn just to give you that break and that refreshment.
Mm,
I love early winter where I live now. It's not so cold in the early winter. We get these really clear, crisp mornings. I love that early morning light in the winter. And I love that the sun goes down early and we get to bed early. I love that feeling of getting to bed early, getting up really early. Yeah. Um, I have a good amount of kapha to me, and so I get a lot of spring allergies. I would say early spring is probably my most challenging season, but who doesn't love the darling buds of May? And so I would say probably May and late September are my favorite times of year.
those transitional seasonal
Yeah,
junctions.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. It's transitional time, the Sundays, but there's also that spark of the new that's coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
This, pay attention, awaken to the golden light of the autumn or that dewy light of late spring. And then all those stone fruits and berries that come in, right? Late May, early June. Nothing like it.
Yeah, except it's the reverse for us here in Australia, but
Sorry, it's
yes.
the reverse. So I think like November and what?
Well, it depends on where you live, but yeah, like October and probably we get stone fruit around February, March
Oh,
here.
okay. It's very different.
Mm,
I'm thinking basically late spring, very late spring,
mm.
and just at the beginning of autumn.
Yeah, lovely, lovely, and it's such a lovely time because you visually see the change and the color, and yes, can totally relate. Okay, so what is one practice or like an aspect of any Vedic science that is integral to you every single day, like something that you apply or embody or integrate every day?
Can I say three things?
Totally. I was actually going to say
Do
it's
I-
probably really difficult for you to pick one.
It's so difficult. I absolutely every day oil the body. So Abhyanga, absolutely oil the body. It has to be done. And the older you get, the more it has to be done. It has to be done. Oiling this vessel. You've got to oleate is one of my I used to say. After the age of 40, all women need to oleate. And that's, good, a little bit of ghee with your meals, and then a good amount of oil on your body every single morning. The second thing is I feel like pranayama I have to do every morning. Pranayama to me is like brushing my teeth. I have to do the pranayama. And it could be as simple as just a nadi shodhana, alternate nostril breathing, kapalabhati. But I do feel like I have to do that. Just this morning I was doing that and the morning light was coming up. It's so beautiful. It's so nourishing. And then I absolutely do mantra every day. And mostly I would say I like to sing, to chant. And chanting is a great joy for me. It really, really warms my heart, opens the heart, and gives me a lot of love and peace. And I do it in the morning, but I also do it throughout the day. And I've been doing it for long enough now that if I lose myself and I'm not paying attention, and I might be gardening or just doing things, if I stop and notice what's going on in my mind, I'm chanting. Instead of having thoughts that are distracting thoughts. Now that's sort of become the background of my mind, which is really lovely. That's the fruit of the practice.
Absolutely. Well, that's why that's where they say we're meant to move towards that internalization of the mantra. It's kind of like when you hear a song on the radio or somewhere somehow and you get it stuck in your head. It's like, okay, let's actually recognize what impressions we're taking in and let it be the mantra that we really assimilate and internalize.
Yeah.
Such a gift.
And isn't it nice to have something that you can reach for when that does happen? You get some song stuck in your head, you're like, oh, put in there. And then you've got a mantra you can just pull up. Okay, here we go. Let's have this instead. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. So, all right, let's wrap up here. Aside from your blog, which is amazing, by the way, Food, A Love Story, which is loaded with incredible value and inspiration. And I can link to it in, again, the podcast show notes. How can the listener best learn from you, with you, whether that's, some way one-on-one or in maybe a group experience of some kind, in person or online? Would you like to share what you've got going on?
Sure, absolutely. Well, one thing that I'm doing is, and it is fun, I am taking those recipes that were given to us while we were in India and putting them on my blog. So just yesterday I posted a really lovely recipe, which is vegetables and coconut, mixed vegetable toran, a very, very typical Kerala dish, and it's delicious. And I'm going to keep I've got a green papaya soup that's coming soon, and a couple of really fun recipes that were inspired by the trip. So that's one way of connecting. If people comment there, I always read all the comments and respond. My actual website is lauraplumb.com, and it's Plumb, so LauraPlumb.com. And my email, laura@lauraplumb.com. I have my training on Ayurveda Integrated Nutrition that comes up. We start in January. It's a 6-month training, teaching people to be nutritional consultants through the genius and the beauty of Ayurveda. And we really dive deep into not only the foundations of Ayurveda, not only the 6 tastes and how to cook and prepare meals, but really how to cultivate strong digestion. Because Ayurveda really does believe that good Agni, good digestive fire, can create optimal health. And when digestive fire is impaired, that can be the root of all disease, right? So Agni is center. It's a center part of our body, and it is central to all healing and wellness and radiance, from the skin to chronic illness, right? It's from thinking, from energy, it's all there. And so this is really about teaching people how to restore and ignite a powerful digestion. But the integrative pieces, we also talk about and work on integrating and digesting life experiences, because we all know that stress can impair digestion, that we need good rest to have good digest. So that's coming up. We do a lot on Vedic counseling skills, etc. And it's a course, it is my signature course, and I really, really love it. It starts in January. We have lots of people from Europe and lots of people from Australia and New Zealand join us. And the timing works pretty well, and everyone can join from wherever they are. It's all online. And that's fun. I'm also going to start in the new year something very similar to what we talked about today. Circles that, I'm calling them Soma circles, but circles to bring people together to integrate these teachings and to integrate them into their life to create more sacred, sumptuous living. So that'll be monthly calls. We'll look at where is the moon this month, how you can work with the moon's flow as it's new and as it comes into fullness. We'll also work with some of these practices of pranayama and Ayurveda and different things. And also we'll make it really practical. How can it help you in your life grow towards where you want to grow? And I really like to make these practices practical. How does this impact you? How does this help you be a better person? How does this help you grow and evolve yourself so that you can help others grow and evolve? So those are the 2 things. We've got the training that's starting in late January, and Soma circles that will begin in January as well. And then on my website, I've got a course in Jyotish, a beginner's course in Jyotish. I've got a course on the nakshatras, the 27 stars that the moon passes every night as she goes around from new to full to new again. So lots of ways to connect, and I love to hear from people.
It all sounds wonderful. And also, I'll pop in the podcast show notes, your Instagram, both your Instagram accounts. You've got Food or Love Story and also Laura Plumb. Is there any, off the top of my head, I can't think, is there any punctuation or anything in there?
At Laura Plumb.
At Laura
Food or
Plumb?
Love Story on Instagram is food.a.love.story.
Okay.
Just dots between the words. And then the other thing is, if anyone wants a Jyotish session, let's give your listeners Plum 10 as a code to get 10% off.
Wonderful.
Okay.
That'd be amazing. I was actually going to ask you, you're still doing one-on-one consultations?
I am still doing one-on-ones. Yeah.
Okay.
Fewer now, but still doing them. And of course I love doing them.
Okay. That's wonderful. That's so nice. So wonderful. Thank you so much for your generosity. I really appreciate it. It's been such a treat to receive your warmth and your grace, like today, but also just online, whenever I see what you're sharing and how you are so eloquently articulating anything and everything, I just feel such a warmth, and I feel such a reverence for you and for everything that you're doing and for your work. It's really beautiful. I feel so enriched by your work and the way that you share it. It's very nourishing. You have such a nurturing warmth to you, and your presence, everything you share is truly enriching. So thank you so very much.
Amy, I could say all that right back to you. I really, really love what you're doing. And I love the integrity of your work and how you deliver it. So thank you.
If this episode was of value to you and your life, please subscribe. And if you can think of someone who would benefit from this dialogue, please do them a favor and send it their way. If you feel called, hop on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. This is the best way to get these conversations into the ears and hearts of our wider community, to those who need it most. You can find me at amyelandry.com or over on Instagram at amyelandry. May we all move a little closer to a life living in alignment.